mean, he would see messages from television. He would thought that people were out to kill him. He would see threat everywhere. And this is what made him so ferocious and so dangerous, because from a quite innocuous sort of remark or glance, suddenly Ronnie Kray would turn on someone.
The KRAYS nightclubs attracted celebrities like Christine Keeler. Judy Garland was another visitor. The twins themselves enjoyed celebrity status until a crackdown on London's gangs ended with both being driven away from the Old Bailey, jailed for life for the murders of George Connell and Jack the Hat McVitie.
When the gunfight got, I thought that would be it. But then again, I look back on it and I think to myself, he had to go. You couldn't leave him free now. We'd set him up. We'd put him in the middle. There was no way out. All I saw was the knife. He must have stabbed him twice within seconds, because I see him sag, and the next thing that happened, Reggie done him in the neck, and the knife arched. And I turned away then, and as I turned around again, I saw the two Mills brothers running out of the room. And there's Jack on the floor. And he had a gash in his neck, which I would say went a third of the way around his neck. But he was dead, the blood was everywhere. And there was just this silence there for about 30 seconds. No one seemed to realise what had happened. Everyone was looking at each other. And all that happened then was Reggie saying to me, "Get rid of that, Tony." And they'd gone.
I went downstairs, and there's the body laying there. But it's hard to understand unless you was in my boots. I just didn't think he was dead. I just couldn't imagine him. I mean, he's laying there in front of me. I thought he was going to come to life. I thought he was asleep. I just didn't think he was dead. Then we heard a knock from upstairs, and it was Tony.
I said to my brother and Ronnie Bent, I said, "Well, what did we do here?" Now, the idea is to get him out of that flat.
Went upstairs and got a quilt. You know, one of them big fleecy kind of quilts, the old-fashioned kind. Got one of them. Got Jack's body, put him on the quilt and wrapped it over. Left him in the middle of the floor and systematically went through the whole house, washing up glasses, carpet, pulled that up where there was blood stains and all that kind of thing. Come about maybe 3 o'clock, maybe between 2 and 3, where we ran the body out to the car, lifted up the boot and actually put the body in the blanket and all that in the car, in the boot of the car. Pull the lid down.
We then have an argument about who's going to drive it away, because nobody wants to be seen that time in the morning. Bearing in mind that I don't know that the offside lamp is not on. It was a two-tone Zodiac, blue and cream, if I remember it right.
I and the other guy got in my car, and Tony set off in that car, in Jack's car. Now, we pull out and we get onto Mare Street, and we're going down Mare Street, and I've got this 38. Now, no way am I going to let anybody take Tony.
And the arrangement was, if I'd have been stopped, there would have been trouble. There was no way I was going to take a stop with that.
So there's a police car pulls up, gets between Tony and I thought, if they stop him, I'm going to get out and I'm going to do the business. And I let the other guy with me know that. Some reason or other, they turned off. And Tony went on, and he went through the Blackwood Tunnel, and I followed him up, and I went through it after him.
A few hours later, the car with McVitie's body in it was abandoned in South London.
So we have a meet with the twins about a week later. They'd gone up the country in the meantime. And we had a meet in the Carpenter's Arms. And all that was ever said in it was nuisance. Because my brother said to him, "Was he a grass? Was he a rollick?" And they went, "No, he was just nuisance." And that is what happened to Gentleman Lee.
As Charlie Kray told his twin brothers,
"We could have had a fabulous life before all these murders. We had it made and we could have gone to better things. And as I said, you two would have been somebody. You was fate in life. And I said, now I think it's gone. You've blown it. Everything, you know. Her mother, father, me, you. We're going to go. I know we are. And everything's finished.
The police were now investigating the KRAYS' involvement in at least 3 murders. At last they felt they had the evidence needed to mop up the firm.
The 34-year-old ex-boxer twins, Reginald and Ronald, came here early this morning with flying squad officers, and they're still here. They were in bed when the squad called at their home in Shoreditch at about 6 o'clock this morning.
But Donahue escaped the net.
And I didn't know anything had happened till I get in the lift, go up to I forget what floor they were on. I walk along and I see there's 2 coppers outside their flat. Even that wouldn't normally worry me too much. I see their front doors standing up against the wall. And I thought, oh yeah. And one of these coppers said, "Who are you?" I said, "My name is Donahue. I've got a cab firm in Bow. And I have a running account with Mr. Cray, and I come once a week to collect." Anyway, he very politely tells me I won't collect that particular week and piss off. So I did, and I was gone. And I went all over the place. Wound up in Bethnal Green. 3 weeks later, the squad came in, and that was it, wiped up. Nicked.
Somebody said, "Have you heard about the KRAYS?" I said, "No, I haven't." He said, "They've all been arrested. They made a dawn raid." Well, it wasn't a matter of weeks before I was staying at a hotel called the Hearts in Walsall that the police made a raid there and brought me down to Tintagel House.
At their headquarters on the south bank of the Thames, the investigating team headed by Leonard Nipper Reed was searching for the first cracks in the wall of silence that protected the KRAYS.
You see, this was a conspiracy between a number of people. And when you get that situation, unless one or other is prepared to give evidence for the Crown, then it's impossible to break that silence. I tried it, as I've explained, with 3 of the participants, and all of them had rejected my overtures.
And Nipper said, "Well, do you want to talk to us now?" So I said, "No, I don't want to talk to you." "Why should I want to talk to you? We are asking you what you know about the murder of Jack the Hat McBee." I said, "I don't know nothing." "Well, as we've got it, you were there but took no actual part in the murder. In fact, you quietly protested about it." I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." So I'm not only defended, I mean, I'm lumped with them anyway. There's no way I can get out of it. If I want to change solicitors, I'm going to offend them. You understand what I mean? So really, there was no way of even fighting the case. And really, I mean, there were in many respects, anything you said to defend yourself put them in a very, very bad position. So invariably, we said nothing.
As far as the twins were concerned, it didn't happen. We can't be seen to be saying something did happen when they're denying all knowledge of it. That's a nail in their coffin. And bearing in mind, we were with them. We were involved here. It's not our row, but we were involved. So we've got to sink with them, whether we like it or not. People have said to me many times, I wouldn't have done that. But they haven't got to look in the mirror. It's me who's got to look in the mirror at the end of the day. And I have to live with that. And I couldn't stand the thought that anything I said would help to convict men and put them down for that length of time.
But the persistence of Nipper and his team was rewarded. One after another, former KRAY associates broke the criminal code of silence and turned Queen's evidence.
Anyway, I go up for a solicitor's visit, it's called. I walk in the room, there's the twins and Charlie Cray and old Manny Freedy. They say to me, what do you reckon? I said, well, this is what I've made, notes I've made. Reggie takes the notes, reads them, and just ripped them up. When he sees this, Freedy, he gets up, he says, I'll go and get another chair. Who for? We're all sitting down. He just wanted to be out of the room so they don't hear. Ronnie says, don't bother with notes, Albert. He said, what we're going to do, Scotch Jack is going to hold his hands up for Cornell. Young Ronnie's going to hold his hands up for Jack the Hat. And we want you to hold your hands up for Mitchell. And we'll take all the violence and frauds. What a wonderful chap, you know. So I looked at him and I said, no. And well, the temperature went down in that room about 10 degrees straight away. And they just staring at me. So that was it. I am now off the firm. Freedy comes back, smells it, and he said, my boy, just because you're not a Kray doesn't mean you won't get the same treatment. I said, yeah. Finish.
Donahue trusted his instinct. He pleaded guilty to a lesser offence of being an accessory to murder and was sent to prison for 2 years. The most damning witness of all proved to be Ronnie Hart, the Krays' own cousin.
Once Hart had decided to tell us who was present, what their involvement was, and the fact that they were present, of course, makes them guilty of the murder, indeed as guilty as Reggie Kray had actually wielded the knife. Once he had given that evidence, we could charge all of them, which we did.
He said, you want to go down with him, you're going to go down with him. Don't stand no nonsense off him. Charge him.
Ronald and Reginald Kray were sentenced to life with a recommendation that they should serve a minimum of 30 years. Chris and Tony Lambriano were also sentenced to life. They didn't come out for 15 years. Charlie Kray was sentenced to 10 years for being an accessory to murder. But in the East End, there were mixed feelings about the verdicts.
When the twins finally got nicked and they got found guilty and what happened to them, I was very, very upset. Very upset, because even though people think they was murderers, villains, gangsters, I mean, there's a lot of people done a lot worse than them, got a lot less for it and still getting less for it. And in a lot of people's eyes, they'll still go as two nice boys, even though it might strange to you. They will be known, still be known as two nice boys.
I mean, the whole of the East End was devastated. I don't think they ever dreamed, nobody in the East End thought that they'd be sentenced to 30 years, minimum sentence.
But one of the architects of their downfall has no such sympathy.
I didn't consider them to be friends as such. Okay, I enjoy having a drink with anybody, and I enjoy listening to anybody's stories of this or that. But I felt that at the end of the day, I was going to get a first-class story out of it, possibly a book, a feature series, and do a public service in exposing them. And I had no scruples about using them and conning them as much as I could.
Ronnie Kray was let out of Broadmoor in the early 80s to attend his mother's funeral. It's thought he could now be buried in the same cemetery, a funeral likely to bring much of London's East End to a standstill. The notorious gangster had collapsed in his room at Broadmoor Hospital on Wednesday. He died this morning after being transferred to another hospital in Today, at the Blind Beggar, one of their closest friends was mourning Ronnie's death.
They were good guys, they were good gangsters, if you want to use such a word. They wouldn't harm women or children, they were untouchable.
If people want to talk about the victims like Jack McVitie or George Cornell and that, they were hardened criminals the same as him. They would have done to Ronnie and Reggie what they'd done to them, and that must always be remembered.
Others, though, were under no illusions. For the policemen who finally caught the Krays, they were far from glamorous heroes.
There's no question about what prevented witnesses giving evidence to suggest that the Krays are involved, and that was terror. Just absolute fear and terror.
Today, Ronnie Kray died in hospital 2 days after collapsing in Broadmoor prison, where he'd been since 1969. ITN's Paul Davies looks back on an extraordinary life of crime.
Gang leader, killer and schizophrenic. Ronnie Kray, in the glasses here, filmed attending his mother's funeral 13 years ago before returning to Broadmoor and the life sentence that ended with his death this morning. Known as the Firm, Ronnie and twin Reggie ruled London's East End. Both had trained as boxers and used violence to impose their protection rackets. Ronnie, on the left of his mother here, was a paranoid schizophrenic, the most volatile and unpredictable of the two. The KRAYS nightclubs attracted celebrities like Christine Keeler. Judy Garland was another visitor. The twins themselves enjoyed celebrity status until a crackdown on London's gangs ended with both being driven away from the Old Bailey, jailed for life for the murders of George Connell and Jack the Hat McVitie. Around the East End and the pub where George Connell was shot dead, there are those who remember Ronnie Kray with affection.
Ronnie Kray, his attitude to life was this: if you do harm to me, I'm going to do harm to you. And I think we all live by that. we were at the East End, and that's how we saw life. I'm not saying it's right, but at least we didn't harm any innocent member of the public.
He had very good principles that wouldn't agree with some people, but certainly principles that agree with me. And women and children, he loved them.
But perhaps the last chapter of the gangster's life was most accurately illustrated by these pictures inside Broadmoor. The small cell where Ronnie Kray spent the years of incarceration. And the man himself, prematurely aged by the drugs he was being treated with, and according to a journalist he befriended, regretting the wasted years.
He never apologised for it, rightly or wrongly, but he never ever tried to make excuses for it. And when he looked back on it, he always said he regarded it as a wasted life.
The actress Barbara Windsor, an old friend of the KRAYS, said today she was saddened by the circumstances of his death.
I am sad because 28 years to be in Broadmoor is a very long time, and I know they were looking forward to coming out and spending their last years in the country.
Ronnie Kray is expected to be buried alongside his mother in London's East End.
But the horse-drawn hearse and the long cortege were there for one of the East End's most notorious criminals, the convicted murderer Ronnie Kray. His twin brother Reggie was allowed out of Maidstone prison to pay his last respects. Paul Davis reports.
It was the East End send-off that Ronnie Kray planned in his prison cell and requested before his death. From early this morning, security men hired by the Kray family guarded the funeral parlour in Bethnal Green, where the procession would begin. Among the floral tributes to the former gangster and convicted killer, this from his twin Reggie, who'd been given permission to leave prison for the day to attend the funeral. Reggie Kray appeared handcuffed to a prison officer as the cortege prepared to move off. The funeral route took the procession along streets the Kray twins used to rule with their own brand of terror and protection rackets back in the early 60s. There were large crowds, although most were curious onlookers. It's debatable whether Ronnie Kray would recognise the East End of today. The coffin was carried along Valence Road, where the Krays used to live, although the terraced family home was demolished many years ago. At St Matthew's Church, the principal mourner, Reggie Kray, was greeted by old friends, many of whom are now campaigning for his release. The Kray family, defending today's spectacular funeral, say people should not forget that Ronnie Kray was mentally ill when he committed his crimes.
I've always said, not making excuses, it's known, doctors will tell you, but the one thing I would love people to remember, who say bad things, remember he had an illness, and if it wasn't for that, he would have been a different person.
Thousands of people lined the streets to watch the funeral procession.
Ronnie Kray had wanted a traditional East End funeral. His family and friends made sure his wishes were respected down to the last detail, the extravagance of the occasion only adding to the Krays mythology. For all the evidence of their violent past, there are still those who maintain the twins preyed only on their own, extorting money from other villains and conducting vicious gangland vendettas. Questioned about his murderous past, Ronnie Kray would simply say, "We never killed any members of the public." Whatever the reality, EastEnders turned out in their thousands to see his coffin pass by, many cheering and applauding a procession that stretched right across Bethnal Green as limousines followed the hearse to the church. Among a mass of flowers, a tribute from his twin brother Reggie, "To the other half of me." Having been allowed out of prison to attend the funeral, Reggie's arrival at the church was loudly cheered. Many in the East End think his sentence to serve not less than 30 years is too long, and they now want him released. The twins' older brother Charlie helped carry the coffin into church, along with pallbearers from the London Manors, once engaged in bitter rivalry with the Krays. During the service, held behind closed doors, the mourners sang the hymn "Fight the Good Fight" and listened to a recording of one of Ronnie's favourite songs, "I Did It My Way." In life, Ronnie Kray revelled in his dubious status as a gangland celebrity. The style of his departure would have been very much to his liking. Peter Gould, BBC News, Bethnal Green.